The American Spectator magazine published an article back in May of 2015, and in the article they quoted a survey that had been done by the American Science Foundation. And in that survey they found out that people are lonely. What they found was 25% of people think they are lonely. And when you take away the immediate family members of people, when you take away those people in their lives, it goes to 50%. 50%.
That's got short in it. That's what Phil said, so he said take this one.
All right. There you go.
Now you get back to being normal.
Yep. Let's make it normal again. There you go. Apparently it's not the batteries, but rather the microphone is bad. Okay. So once again, 50%. In other words, what they found was that people don't have. This is really fun, actually, you know. How's that? Are we going to let that one work this time? All right, I think we're going to try it again. All right. 50% of people think that they have nobody outside of immediate family to talk to. When they have a problem, when things aren't going well, if they don't have an immediate family person, then they don't have anybody to talk to. Now, number one, that's just sad. That's just terrible. When you are that ostracized from people, when you feel that you are in that desperate a situation, how terrible a life must that be? You see, God made us social creatures. Now, we don't all have the same social affinities. Some are much more outgoing than others, but we are all basically social creatures. When God made Adam, He looked and said, it's not good that man should be alone. And so His point is that we don't do well always alone. That's why in prison, solitary confinement is a punishment. Because we don't do well alone. Even those who are not really out there, who aren't putting their social connections in the front and they're last one to leave any setting because they're talking to everybody. Even those people who stand over in the corner, they want to have a place that they belong. They want to have connection. This morning, I want us to think about a continuing concept. We talked earlier, what does the Father want for you? We've already seen that He wants hope, wants us to have hope, and now He wants us to have a place to belong. The Father wants you to have a place that you belong. We understand what it means to belong. When we join a club, when we are a part of a team, when we are on a committee, we want to belong. It seems to me that loneliness is something that we all run from to some degree or another because we want to be able to say, this is where I belong. Maybe the best way to understand the word belong would be simply to separate it. We want to be at a place where we can be long. Your Father wants you to have a place where you belong so that you can be there long. God told us in the Old Testament, as he unfolded his plan, that he wanted to provide the church. The church that Jesus told Peter about when he said, I will build my kingdom and the gates of Hades will not prevent it. That kingdom was the church. Established, recorded for us in Acts chapter 2 on that Pentecost Sunday. Now, there are many people who teach that the church was a substitute for the kingdom. Meaning that Jesus intended to set up a kingdom on earth, but the Jews rejected him, and so he said, fine, that's how you're going to be. I'll just set up the church and let it be there until I decide to bring the kingdom when you're ready for it. The problem with that is twofold. One, when God says I have a plan and he does it, man's not going to thwart it. But two, Jesus to Pilate said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight. So Jesus never intended to set up an earthly kingdom like the Jews wanted to have that would give them political and military power. Even his own disciples said in Acts chapter 1, right before he ascended to heaven, will you now set up the kingdom? They wanted it too. So the church is not a fail-safe, not a second option, not just something we run to because the first one didn't work. The church is what Jesus said he was going to set up. And why did he do it? So that we all would have a place to belong. I want you to notice with me, turn with me to some scriptures quickly, that identify this concept of belonging as it occurs in the verses that deal with the church as the body of Christ. The one body. First of all, before we get into those verses, let me make it clear that this is what we're talking about. God established the church. He did not establish multiple churches. It was not the intention of God to establish all kinds of different churches teaching their own thing, doing their own thing. That's not what Jesus prayed for in John 17, that we would all be one. His intention was for there to be one church. Ephesians 4 and verse 4, there's only one body over which Jesus is the head. He is not a monster as a head over multiple bodies. There's one body, the church. And it should be our goal to have continual restoration of that concept of the church that Jesus said he would and did establish. We never arrive. We never get to the point where we can say, we got it all right, now we can sit down. But what we can say is this: I want to be a part of the one body, the church, that Jesus established. And we are continually studying and thinking and having the mentality of restoring to that original as best we can that Jesus established. Therefore, the one body, the place where you can belong. We begin with the text that was read just a minute ago in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. And I want you to notice a couple of things. Number one, look at verse 18. Now God has set the members, each one of them, in the body just as he pleased. Let me suggest, first of all, that the place where you can belong is the place where you are known. Where you're known. When somebody knows you, that's where you belong. People who are socially not as outgoing, part of the reason is because nobody knows me. If somebody knows me, then I feel better. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? Notice what this text says. Each one of them, we've been set in the body, each one of them, as God pleased. Here's what I wonder. Is this passage teaching that the way in which I am a part of this church, the way that you are a part of the church, with your talents and your abilities, God is responsible for those talents and for those abilities. He gave them to you. And as you make yourself a part of this one body, people know you by the way that you display the talents and abilities that God has given you. That's what I'm wondering, and that's what I think. Because then you're known. How many times have you said something like this? Wow, I didn't know he could do that. That's great. I didn't know she had that ability. You see, when we reveal by our works the talents and the abilities that we have, that God has given to us, then people who see them know us. And when they know us, we have a connection. And when we have a connection, we belong. We're known. I held a series of meetings in Glasgow, Kentucky earlier this year. One of the more fascinating places I've ever been. And I know them now. And I know them in a way I've never known any other group of people. There were 35 people in that congregation. 35. And they had 12 song leaders. 12. And not only that, but they sang every single song in the book. I don't care if it had a bass lead, an alto lead, a tenor lead, and all kind of different parts and people doing things. They know every single one of them. I know them because they put their talents on display. You see, when God gives you a talent and an ability, and you use it in that body, people know you. They know you as someone that God has blessed. And then you belong. Look at verse 21. The eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor the head to the feet, I have no need of you. The place where you belong is the place where you are accepted. Accepted for who you are. After all, God made you. This is who I am. Of course, this is not about me continuing to be something that is not what God wants me to be and then say, well, God made me this way. Don't blame God for your failures and your faults. Let's not blame God for our dipping into our lusts and our problems and say, well, God made me this way. No, that's not how God made you. But these talents and these abilities that God has given you, that's how He made you. And in the place where you belong is where people accept you with those talents and those abilities. It's sad to hear, and I've heard it, when someone in a local congregation says, they won't let me do that. What? Some talent and ability that you have that you can give to that local body, and you don't think they will let you do it? Wow, how terrible is that? If you want to belong, you want to be accepted. And God says, don't anybody say to somebody else, I don't need you. Because we're supposed to accept. Keep going. Those members, verse 22, of the body which seem to be weaker are necessary, and those members which we think less honorable, on these we bestow greater honor, and our presentable parts have greater modesty. But our presentable parts have no need, but God composed the body, having given greater honor to that part which lacks it. Number 3, the place you belong is the place where you're appreciated. You might be considered weaker, but you should be appreciated. You might be considered stronger, and you should be appreciated. You know what I think is going on here? Here's what I think God is saying. Our presentable parts. What are those? Hands, feet, legs, ears. This is what we see. Presentable parts. What protection do they have? Nothing. We're here. This is it. But you know what God did? He took the ones that need the greater protection, the heart, the lungs, the kidneys, the liver, and He put it inside a protective case to give it some help. And yet when we look at people, what do? My, you got a good-looking liver. We can't do that, right? In fact, when was the last time you sat down and thought about your liver? How you doing, buddy? Probably not. Because it's a weaker part. It's inside. It's not presentable. We don't even think about it. Put that in the context of a spiritual family. What are the presentable parts? The preacher, the song leader, the teacher, the shepherds, the deacons, Bible class teachers. How do we see a church? In those ways. We think about those people and we talk about those people. But what about the people that don't fill those roles? In the analogy of the body, they would be called weaker, not because they're less, but because they have talents and abilities that need to be protected and cared for. But mostly they need to be appreciated, not overlooked. A place where you belong is a place where you are appreciated for who you are. Number 4. Verse 25, there should be no schism in the body, but that the members should have the same care for one another. If one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. If one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. The place where you belong is the place where you are cared for. Not just accepted, not just appreciated, but cared for. It's so sad if someone ever says, no one ever checked on me. I've had people say to me in the past, this was going on in my life, and not one person called to check on me. Not one person sent me a card. Nobody came to see me. What do you think that does to the psyche of that person? Do they feel that they belong? You belong in the place where you know people care for you. Look at Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 16. from whom the whole body joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by which every part does its share, causes growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. You have a place to belong when you have a place to be involved. When you have a place to be involved, that's where you belong. It's not just to be cared for when you are in trouble or things are not going well, but rather you're involved. You have, as we might say, skin in the game. I heard someone say one time, well, at my church, and someone goes, oh, it's not your church, it's Jesus' church. Now, wait a minute. Yes, Jesus died for it, Jesus paid for it, and Jesus built it. But you know what? It's my church. Because I put myself in it. Because I'm involved in it. I have an investment. Every single person, in order to belong, needs to have an investment in order to feel belong. To feel like I belong, I need an investment. And you have a place to belong when you are involved. Colossians chapter 2, verse 19. Holding fast to the head, from whom all the body, nourished and knit together by joints and ligaments, grows with the increase that is from God. In this body, it's a place to belong when you are better because you are there. That's where you belong. To a place that makes you better. Think about people who in a desire to belong, and it happens all the time. In this longing to have a place to belong, they join up with some group, some gang, some cult. Some group that takes advantage of and abuses them, and they allow it to happen because at least they belong. You know why? Because they think it'll make them better. In fact, it doesn't. But that's what they're looking for. Here's the point. It's better to be there than to be alone. The place you belong is the place where you are better as a part. Finally, chapter 3, verse 15 of Ephesians, or Colossians that is. Let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which also you are called in one body. Be thankful. The Lord called us into the body in order to find peace. The place where you belong is the place where you can finally say, I am at peace. If you've ever moved and uprooted your life and gone to a totally different place, you know what I'm talking about. Nobody knows you. But all of a sudden, you get to know someone, and now you start to feel better. And then they accept you into their group, and you're thinking, hey, it's getting good. And as a part of that group, they really appreciate the contribution that you make, and you're excited. And when things are not going well, they call and check on you and you're cared for. And wow, this is outstanding. And then you start to play a part. You have skin in the game. And it works. It's happening. You're doing things. You're excited. And everything is working exactly as it should. And you're thinking to yourself, wow, this is outstanding. And then you sit back and look and think, you know what? I made the move. I was afraid. But I'm better. than I was. And at that point, you can sit down and say, I'm at peace. You know what people are looking for when they're lonely? Peace. The place you belong is where you find those things. Oh, but we're not finished. Here's the final challenge. The Richmond Church of Christ. Are we a place where people can belong? Are we fostering the kinds of things that help us to get to know and accept and appreciate and care for and involve people for them to be better and peaceful? That should be our goal. That should be what we're doing. But are we? Maybe there's a structure in place, a way to do it congregationally. Okay, but what about you? What about me as an individual? Don't I play a part in whether somebody feels that they belong? Absolutely. Today, here's what I know. Everybody here, you want to belong. You want to belong. You want to be connected. And that's what your Father wants for you. He wants you to belong. Those of you that have had children move away, those of us, and you find out that the place they have gone to, somebody or some groups of people have taken them in. How do you feel? That's our Father. That's what He feels about us. When we take in people who are looking for a place to belong. Jesus is for you if you want to belong. When you give your life to Him, culminating in your baptism, He adds you to the body. That's the place where you can belong. That's the place where God knows and accepts and appreciates. He cares for you. And when you need to get your life right with the Lord, come back. That's the place you belong. And to all of us, let us decide, I'm going to be a part of helping people belong. Can we help you this morning with something in your life? If you need us, we're here if you come while we stand and sing.